Hey guys, Metatrends Mark here. Welcome to another video. We're the authors of Metatrends and the Next Economy, Everything You Need in One Flight Read. Okay, so today's video is about how most people have the wrong worldview. So I just finished actually reading Hans Rosling's book called Factfulness. This is a really worthwhile read in the line of Steven Pinker's work about Enlightenment Now too. So the reason why I'm showcasing both of these books is because especially Factfulness caused me to question one of the things we talk about in our book in chapter 6. So what we do is we utilize demographic information downloaded from the CIA's World Book of Facts to be able to predict whether an economy is likely to thrive going forward or not. We've actually shot a whole nother video on that. You're welcome to take a look at that one. But our chapter 6 talks about the top economies of the future. So Hans Rosling's book, well, let me back up for a second. Pinker is my favorite author, but I have no delusions that the majority of most people aren't capable of reading or willing to read at the level of Pinker. Pinker is a linguist out of Harvard and a PhD in cognitive science, and he's kind of showing off in every one of his paragraphs. Now again, he's my favorite author, mainly because of the way he's able to thoroughly argue from every different angle whatever point he's trying to make, so that you can walk away feeling rest assured that whatever his conclusions are spot on, scientifically accurate. Now I prefer that type of reading, but I recognize most people don't have the time that I do to read. I'll read somewhere because I travel and fly around the country so much. Like for example, last week I was on 4 separate flights. Actually, the day before yesterday and yesterday, I was on 4 separate flights. That's really kind of rare. Most people don't travel that much. And I have this affliction, maybe blessing, depending on how you want to look at it, that I don't sleep on flights. So I utilize that time to read, so I read voraciously. I'll do somewhere between 25 and 50 books a year. Now, if they're Pinker books, they're probably more like the 25. If they're Hans Rosling style books, they're more like the 50 because they're quicker. In fact, of the 4 flights that I did between Tuesday and Wednesday, 2 days ago and yesterday, I was able to read the entirety of Hans Rosling's book in 3 of those flights and start to write down key takeaways. So one of the key takeaways is he argues that companies like Coca-Cola and large multinationals are actually suffering from the wrong worldview. And he argues all the psychological and evolutionary psychology and biology reasons about why we tend to have the wrong worldview. You know, what helped us survive on an African savanna isn't particularly relevant and can even hinder our perceptions of the world in today's society because we don't have to worry about being attacked by lions and so forth. So one of the most salient points in his book is that we tend to have freeze dry our worldview on the date of our graduation from school. So if you graduated college or graduated high school, the last date of your schooling, you tend to perceive the world through that lens, not realizing that positive things happen incrementally over time, accumulate, and suddenly your worldview is wrong. See, we tend to focus on the negative because it helped us survive on an African savanna. The bad things, chemicals released in our brains, we remember those better, we pay attention to those dramatic things better, and he builds a very strong argument for that to be the case, which coincides with Pinker's arguments too. So they're in agreement on these, just the style of how they present them is slightly different. So how does that lead to us to business? Well, what Hans Rosling would talk about is most of the people, especially in Europe and America, are suffering from snootiness about the rest of the world that's slowly catching up. Now he argues that there should be 4 categories of economies, worst to best, that type of thing. I think I'd like to stay within the realm of what the UN is still calling first world, second world, third world. And his argument is that more countries in the last 20 years have gone from third world status to second world status, and we are missing a massive opportunity in both Africa and Asia. So what I would argue is we can simply just look back to the CIA's World Book of Facts or Chapter 6 in our book, where we comment on each one of the countries and sit back and say, okay, from a demographic perspective, our products or services are sell to XYZ age. we can see, well, which one of the countries are most likely to have a surge in that in the next 15 years or so. That's utilizing strategic thought and demographic data, eliminating our emotional or maybe freeze-dried impression of what the world looked like when we graduated school. So to him, we're missing massive opportunities for investment of time and energy and money into certain economies within our companies. In other words, where should we be diversifying into in the next expansion wave for our companies? He's saying we're missing out on Africa and Asia because of prejudices, not from like a racial perspective, but like, oh, you're still stuck in the past and you're not quite as advanced as we are, when they are advancing at a much quicker pace than both Europe and America did, because they basically can learn it from us and advance quicker. They can skip over technologies, like they're not putting down copper wire for phone lines, they're going straight to cellular. They can skip over that and they can accelerate in their growth faster. So I don't know, I thought it was a really interesting point that Hans Rosling brought up, is that maybe we should be paying attention to other areas because they're growing at 5-6% per year, as opposed to the old line West countries that are growing at more like 2%. Right? I would argue that if we utilize both it and Chapter 6 in our book about looking at the demographic story, then we do one other analysis where you look at, is the country pro-trade? And if they are, they're more likely to live up to their potential. You do those 3 types of analysis, now you're going to be knowing you're diversifying to the right countries. But this is totally a worthwhile read. Actually, all 3 of these books are actually phenomenal reads, and I'd highly recommend them. Just fair warning, the Pinker books are a little bit more difficult to read. The Hans Rosling book is a little easier. So what I want you to do is keep your mind open, otherwise you might be missing opportunities. So Metatrends Mark, the book is Metatrends and the Next Economy, everything you need in a one-flight read. Thanks for watching, and thanks for subscribing.